2024 is over, and 2025 has the high ground, but before we venture forth into futures unknown and what might be waiting for us in this coming year, I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to take a look back at 2024 and pass our judgment on all the units that we were given in this wonderful, wonderful year. Let's break this down. The very first unit that we were graced with in 2024 was the Comeuppance. It was a brand new and, might I say, much needed ship for the Resistance faction. CG never really struck it quite right with that Resistance fleet. It at times was a semi-useful fleet that might be able to save you if things go terribly wrong. However, the problem with the Resistance fleet in general is if you are having to resort to whenever things have gone wrong, it's already just a little bit too late. The Comeuppance was their idea to revitalise that. With Zori Bliss coming out previously, this actually did make for a pretty good investment, and it worked at 5 stars. So you could get this ship as a galactic chase, rest in peace, that wonderful, wonderful way of releasing ships, and you could actually make some pretty good units with this. You could make some pretty good headway, in terms of fleet compatibility. The problem is the Comeuppance, much like what they did with the SF-17, the previous tank that they released for the Resistance fleet, just didn't do enough. It was good, don't get me wrong, but still to this day, the Resistance fleet with the Radus is only really being relegated to a cleanup fleet or something that gets to take out a Malevolence if you happen to see it on defense. And whilst that is fun and entertaining, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, and I'd say for the most part, I never use the Resistance fleet. It just isn't worth it, it doesn't do anything in TB, and there are very few situations where it is of high value in PvP engagements in general. So for me, it wasn't the best start to the year in 2024, just not a great ship. Still, the Resistance faction, as far as fleet is concerned, probably the worst fleet in the game right now. Bit of a shame. Moving on from the Comeuppance then, we had the STAP released to the game, and in contrast to the Comeuppance, this was actually a fantastic unit. Now, in similarity to the Comeuppance, we can almost argue that the STAP is kind of like the Comeuppance of the Grievous faction. It's like it does a lot of things, but maybe not quite enough to bring it into full-time relevance. When it first came out, there was, of course, the Omicron that's on its unique ability that really does help elevate it, really does help elevate GG squads, and for a time, it was out there taking out GL Layer, and it was taking out JML. I mean, it could do that before anyway, but it did do a heck of a lot for the faction, especially when there was a dedicated Datacron for the team. This thing could absolutely TM roll. Very, very strong unit. However, again, I wouldn't say it's massively prevalent in modern day metas, so perhaps it hasn't lasted. The longevity of this unit perhaps is not incredibly long. I still don't see a lot of people using STAP, and even more so using the Separatist faction in general. It's still not a bad unit, and I would definitely rate it as better than the Comeuppance. Overall, fun unit, just maybe a little bit short-lived. A lot of good stuff it does do for General Grievous teams in general, but it's not enough to really shake up any sort of meta. After the STAP, we had the releases of the Gungan faction, and I don't really want to talk about these units on an individual basis because they really are a team that has to work together. They need each other, it has to be full Gungans, otherwise you just do not get the benefit of the team. There was a period early on where you could have 4 Gungans in any 5th and it would still summon the shield generator, and people could do some really horrific things like have 4 Gungans and throw in Wat Temple to put tank tech on the phalanx, and you still have the shield generator, and it became horrendous. But overall, the Gungan faction was a heck of a lot of fun, and now they are really starting to come into their own. At first, when they were first released, fantastic on defense with their dedicated Datacrons, they were a real problem to get through. The fact that they combined essentially dropping all of their health and throwing that into max protection with a lot of max protection gains from Boss Nass and a lot of protection recovery from various elements of their kits, throw that in with boatloads of debuffs, lots of mass assists, turn meter swapping, permanent deaths with certain Zetas, and throw it in with the new raid, which was the Battle for Naboo raid, which might have been a bit of a loss overall. The Gungan faction was absolutely phenomenal. Jar Jar Binks, a long-term fan, don't want to call him a favourite. He is the fan Marmite, I guess you might call him. You either love Jar Jar Binks or you hate his guts, basically. I'll let you decide on how you want to treat that. But turns out Jar Jar Binks, throwing him into the mix, applying so many amazing debuffs with the thematics that they just nailed just right with Jar Jar Binks. Still makes me it still tickles me to this day that Jar Jar can actually put death mark on himself because everybody wants to go after him. Throw that in with the frustration mechanic and the confusion mechanic, and it seems like they've captured the essence of who this character was. As far as in terms of meta performance is concerned, the Gungans are brilliant. They really are. Defensively speaking, they can be a bit of a problem. A lot more counters are available to them now with new character releases coming out and their datacrons falling off. However, we can take them off defense, put them on offense, and do some really, really solid work. Just earlier yesterday in GAC, I used a trio of Gungans without Jar Jar Binks and took out a full Relic 9 Reaver team with triple Omicrons and the GI Inquisitor Quon. They are really solid. They've taken out GLs, they've taken out any number of A and B tier teams, and just very, very flexible. They also have lots of work that they can put into in territory battles on Rise of the Empire TB. Overall, I'd highly, highly recommend the Gungan faction. Really, really is a solid, solid team. Lots of fun, and they can take down some really hefty teams. I think we're going to have a lot of fun figuring out in the future just what additional teams that they can take out rather successfully. Brilliant, brilliant release there. During the Gungan release, we also had the conquest for Darth Bane, and Darth Bane is phenomenal. Probably the single most powerful unit that they released in a year, and let's be honest, we had a Galactic Legend come out this year, and I would still probably pick Bane. A lot cheaper, a lot easier, and a lot of viability in the game even to this day. When he came out with his Datacron, I will argue that Darth Bane was too powerful. It was basically a get-out-of-jail-free card you could just go into and take out any team, no matter what. Galactic Legend, no matter what Datacron, no matter what team comp, he would just be like, oh, I'm going to win now. And even though he was purported to be a sea lifter when he was being released through Conquest, he was actually in most circumstances better off on his own with a +1 Sith compatriot. I usually use him with Sith Empire Trooper, taking out things like Queen Amidala teams, taking out things like Leia teams, GL Leia teams. He is phenomenal. At this point, once his Datacron has dropped off and disappeared, he's not as powerful, but still very, very strong, and is almost guaranteed to beat anything that you throw him up against. Absolutely 100% my favourite unit of 2024 is this boy Darth Bane. He is just kicked ass, taking names, and looks complete badass doing it. If you get the opportunity to start farming Darth Bane, I know it's a conquest character, so it's proving grounds and all that sort of thing. He's a worthwhile investment, 100%. Up next, we had the trio of Master Qui-Gon Jinn, Padawan Obi-Wan, and Queen Amidala. I'm once again going to assess these all as a team rather than individual units, because whilst characters like Master Qui-Gon Jinn and Padawan Obi-Wan can be plug and play to a certain degree, you can use them under things like JML, you can use them under Jedi Master Kenobi, you can even throw them in teams like Padme teams, I mean not Queen Amidala teams, but Padme teams, or alternatively Keller and Beck teams. Where they really shine is specifically under Queen Amidala. The great thing about these guys was the value that you get out of investing into them. Not only did you have a team that can perform excellently within the new raid, getting you top-end scores as an undermanned team. It's tricky, lots of modding, lots of RNG, but it can be done. But you also got gifted a new assault battle with absolutely phenomenal rewards in Duel of the Fates. That particular assault battle only required Master Qui-Gon Jinn and Padawan Obi-Wan, different tiers with different levels of investment, and the first one that required any sort of Relic 9 investment. But you can earn things like Girder keypads and droid brains and about 22 million credits. It was absolutely phenomenal. Now, on a power scale, when these guys came out, particularly Padawan Obi-Wan had his own Datacron, a bespoke one when he first came out, that was only available for people that wailed on him in the first instance of his arrival. He was phenomenal. True damage out the wazoo, just nuking units left and right. AoE, attacking under protection, doing hundreds of thousands of points of damage. And to this day, the Queen Amidala team is a very solid and reliable team to use both offensively or defensively. Offensively, you can take out Galactic Legends with this team, things like GL Leia, things like Rey, relatively easily as well because they are incredibly tanky and they have a lot of damage output. Master Qui-Gon Jinn is a support character, but he has some of the highest damage-dealing attacks that I've ever seen in the game. The multipliers on these abilities are absolutely phenomenal, and he can even increase his max health, which also feeds the damage of this AoE. Really, really solid and fun team to be using, with some well-known counters. There are also Omicrons for both GAC under Queen Amidala and in Territory Wars for Master Qui-Gon Jinn. Both of them, I think, are worthwhile to invest in. And then for those of you that want to have an easier time in Conquest, Padawan ObiWan does have a Conquest Omicron that is very useful when you have those feats that are like, you know, apply X debuff or gain Y buff, because he has basically all of them. Now, I don't apply it because as a late game account, I don't need this. I have enough depth in my roster to be able to hit these feats without having to resort to using Padawan ObiWan, apologies there, but this is still seen in the community to be a very useful Omicron to have. Like I said, especially if you are in early game and you just do not have the depth of roster to be able to apply this, apply these various debuffs and buffs. Very, very useful team, very, very fun. Lots and lots of viability across all game modes, PvP, TB, all of it works, and you get raid compatible tunes, and you get an assault battle to go with it. Huge, huge value for investing in these characters. They absolutely nailed it. One of the best teams that CG has released in years, in my opinion. After that, we had a couple of releases around the Imperial Remnants / Night Sisters, going alongside that Ahsoka Tano series release that we had. It started off with Night Trooper, and then we dipped into Morgan Elsbeth, then Death Trooper Peridia and Captain Enoch, and then Great Mothers, all this sort of good business. I'm going to start off with the Imperial Remnants, and I'm going to look at these as a trio, the Peridia Patrol Trio, we'll call them, because just like Queen Amidala and Master Qui-Gon Jinn and Padawan ObiWan, these three units got given an assault battle which is very similar in the vein to Duel of the Fates. Much of the same rewards, just a little bit of change up in reward structure with the inclusion of Omicrons as well as some reshuffling in the middle tiers. Now, this wasn't as high value as the Duel of the Fates because the barrier to entry was higher. You had to have one additional unit in Captain Enoch as well as Night Trooper and Death Trooper Peridia, so investment levels were higher. The rewards were diluted a little bit, not necessarily less, but with having an additional tier of rewards for Omicrons in the final tier, it means if you were particularly looking for good keypads or droid brains, but you got the Omicrons instead, not necessarily a bad thing, but not necessarily a good thing either. So yes, it was nice to have that sort of second bite of the apple, but it wasn't quite as good. Now, this was mixed in, of course, with a lot of the drama that was surrounded around CG rearranging assault battles and dropping one off the rotation, and then the community outrage made them put it back in, so we went back up to 9 assault battles during a month. I fully expect any future assault battles to start knocking one off each month so that we get a new rotation of assault battles each month, and forces us to sort of invest in new characters all of the time. That being said, how do I feel about Night Trooper and Death Trooper Peridia and Captain Enoch? Overall, when it came out and this team dropped to the holotables, it felt not so much underwhelming. Yes, underwhelming, I guess, is the problem. It feels like they missed the mark, and it always felt like, to me personally, that this whole team was just a placeholder. It was here as a short-term stopover until we get some brand new Galactic Legend Admiral Thrawn, and I do feel like we are going to get that at some point in the near future. Probably in 2025 at some point. I think we'll see Galactic Legend Thrawn, and he will take the place essentially of Enoch. Enoch will be in the team with Night Trooper and Death Trooper Peridia, and we might get an extra +1 to fill that team out, be it a Conquest unit or a new Legendary or whatever that happens to be. With that being said, this trio, unfortunately, you don't really use them as a trio. You know, Night Trooper and Death Trooper Peridia often go over to a Great Mother's team, and we'll touch on them in a second. And Captain Enoch has got such a fantastic unique in his, Ominous Sentinel, I believe. This unique here is so highly valuable because it is completely plug and play. Enemies, excluding Galactic Legends, have minus 450 crit chance. That is enough to completely invalidate crit chance up, or advantage. Advantage, when you read the buff, it says crit if you are able. But from a mechanic perspective, all advantage does is give you 200% crit chance. 450 negative crit chance means it doesn't matter, you're still not going to crit in most circumstances. That made Captain Enoch a really, really good unit to just place in any team that you want. Now obviously he does very well in teams that synergize with his tags, like Imperial Remnants, so DTMG lead, which is a far better lead overall in my opinion. You can just throw him in there and you just make that DTMG team even more tanky, because DTMG synergizes heavily with lots and lots of defense, decreasing that incoming damage. You throw in Enoch as a support character and now you can't crit that team, so lots of defense, no real crits, revives, all this sort of good business. Enoch, unfortunately, good intentions, but it feels like he's just becoming an add-on into other teams. Now, I've faced people in GAC that have used Enoch very, very interestingly, throwing him in teams to try and, drag out battles. I've seen him in a Scoundrel team under Afra, where essentially you can't crit the Afra team, and you throw Dengar in there and it's got, he's got the Dengar Cron to interrupt your turns, ramp up a lot of damage, and there's just a lot going on there. So he's got great potential as a plug and play unit, just because not being able to crit the entire team with no restrictions around who that applies to makes him very, very valuable, but at the same time detracts from his ability to lead his own units. Now, Night Trooper and Death Trooper Peridia are a heck of a lot of fun. They've got great synergy with each other and with Captain Enoch, with a new decay mechanic where you can deal quite a significant amount of damage. When they came out, they were doing some fun stuff like beating Jabba the Hutt, for example. I used to use them quite a bit to beat Jabba the Hutt, and even then you can throw them with Imperial Remnants or DTMG teams and still get a lot of fun out of them. The other place that they do go very, very well is with a Great Mothers team. And I want to take a moment right now to say that Great Mothers, this trio, this marquee had no right being so strong. This was a standard marquee. They called it a unique, or I can't remember what they called it, like a super marquee unit, essentially, which is just a reason for them to say it's a legendary unit, basically, guys, because the amount of power in a Great Mothers team is frankly absurd. Stronger than most legendaries, stronger than any marquee that we've ever had, stronger than a lot of conquest units. Like, we've got Boba Fett, Scion of Django, a conquest unit that took 3 months for people to get, and you had to, refresh conquest 3 times a day for 2 weeks or whatever it is. Great Mothers comes as a marquee unit available to everybody in an accelerated marquee format, so you could drop $150 and get her with a Datacron that is the most broken Datacron that we've ever seen, and I'm so glad it's gone. She is absurd, ridiculously powerful. Starts with the turn if you've got full Night Sisters, is able to place the Doomed debuff, which is a locked debuff that can't be resisted, which just immediately removes your protection, and every single time you take a turn, you're losing 20% max health, and every time the Great Mothers does a basic on you, you lose 20 max health, and then you are dead and you can't be revived, and then she gets a bonus turn and can place it on someone else. It is a ticking time bomb of a team with ridiculous levels of survivability and absolutely absurd levels of offensive power. Even without their Datacron, the Great Mothers teams are frankly ridiculous and completely overpowered. I kind of like it, but I'm just glad the Datacrons are gone. Because even now, without their Datacrons, they are, whilst a shadow of their former selves, still incredibly powerful. Now, Morgan Elsbeth was the first character that we had that was really supposed to go with her, and she's actually a pretty cool tank. The thing is they've baked in a lot into these kits to make sure that you don't use them with the old Night Sisters under Mother Talzin lead, which is already a pretty strong team, especially with Merrin. So they introduced lots of very deliberate anti-revive mechanics into these kits. If Morgan Elsbeth is on the team, your Night Sister allies can't revive, for example, so you don't use her in Mother Talzin team. However, it feels a little bit like it's shoehorned very deliberately, and that can be sometimes a little bit stifling when it comes to creativity and theory crafting. So a little bit disappointing. Overall, Morgan Elsbeth is a solid tank. She's got a cleanse, she's got a taunt, she's got armor shreds, she's got mass assists, and she is incredibly tanky, especially if you've modded her correctly. Ignore the way that I've modded her right now. It's not really how I want to be running her. But overall, I would say Great Mothers, top tier, high meta team unit, all the way up there alongside Bane and, the Spectre faction with Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano. The Night Troopers and the Peridia Patrol team, much lower on the value, in my opinion. They're still good units, but probably a B tier at best, and still quite a bit of fun. You can still get good value out of their assault battle, and you can even get some value out of Captain Enoch in TB if you happen to want to apply TB Omicrons. Overall, some pretty fun units, and I'm glad that we've seen the end of the Great Mother's Datacron. Even though I had it, I'm glad it's gone. Never to return again, I hope. Coming up next, we had the introduction of Shin, Marok, and eventually Balin's Skull as an epic confrontation. I think it was on Halloween his event dropped. Now, this was a highly hyped event. If anybody was ever enjoying the Ahsoka TV show, I'm sure you were looking forward to Balin's Skull coming to the game. I certainly was. I was a massive fan of Ray Stevens' portrayal of Balin's Skull in that. I thought it was really cool, a really enigmatic sort of he was a character that you just wanted to know more about, because he could just draw a scene in, and he just comes into the scene with his combat style, which is very much like a behemoth. He's just a large, imposing, composed tank, and they nailed it, in my opinion. With his release, Shin and Marok, masses and masses of damage and synergy, lots and lots of fun, and they're squishy. They are like glass cannons almost of the team, whereas Balin's Skull, he can do terrific damage, especially right now because he has his bespoke Datacron, but he tanks the damage so that they can all rank up. This introduced a brand new faction tag with the Mercenaries, and the Mercenaries got spread out across like 20 to 30 different characters in the game, which is great. It shows that CG has got a little bit of forethought about bringing on new Mercenaries as the game continues to expand into 2025, and hopefully introduces even more potential synergies that we can throw in this team. Now, overall, Shin is a lot of fun. She can call to assist on her basic. She's got some unlocking abilities that scales with her Soldier of Fortune, a new mercenary mechanic, and Marok is an Inquisitor. So he can work with Inquisitorius and works very well in TB. He has a TB Omicron that completely trivializes all content if you happen to have Inquisitors to work with him, particularly making the Reaver mission an absolute doddle. Now, I don't always recommend investing in these Omicrons. You can see I do not have it myself, but it is an option available to the player base should they want to invest in it. It will give you very reliable, max scoring TB teams if you happen to do it. Now, apart from that, we do have, I think it's a TW Omicron on Shin Hati, and we've got 3 GAC Omicrons on Balin's Skull. You can see I took my Balan to Relic 9 immediately and dropped all 3 Omicrons because I just really enjoyed the character and I wanted him to be very good. His compatibility and his competitiveness in PvP game modes is very good. I used him earlier today just to take out a Jedi Master Kenobi team with Commander Ahsoka Tano. With these Omicrons active inside GAC with his Datacron, I was able to completely ignore the fact that Commander Ahsoka Tano has got an insta-kill, did nothing to Balan, and I proceeded to completely wipe out the entire JMK team in less than a minute, basically. Absolutely fantastic team and a heck of a lot of fun. Now, I'm not necessarily going to recommend people run out immediately and start farming these guys, but I will say that part of the requirements are the Great Mothers, and the Great Mothers in and of themselves are definitely units that you would want to invest in. So it is a consideration for relatively new players to consider, to think about going for Balin's Skull. Now, we haven't had an announcement of when he is coming back, but as he did drop at the end of October, we should probably expect to see him back around February time, either early February, mid-February, or even late February. Now, there's no guarantees. It could be in 6 months' time. We just don't know. There's always a little bit of fast and loose played with CG when it comes to the frequency of returning legendary events. Look at characters like Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, or even Grand Inquisitor, who took a long time to come back in his initial release, and Malak, for example. He was an epic confrontation character that didn't come back for about 125 days after the first release. That being said, if you think you can prepare for him, I do recommend it. It is a lot of fun. Outside of that, we did have another Conquest character in Luthen Rael. Now, Luthen is, of course, from the Andor season, and this guy was supposed to elevate Rebel fighters. What I really like that CG did with this particular character is that they said you could make use out of him in 2 different teams. You could either go with Mon Mothma team, or you could go with a Saw Gerrera team. And the great thing is there's viability in either of those routes. Under a Mon Mothma team, I would argue he is superior, simply because there are better mechanics that come together to make that team very, very good, particularly if you've got things like Hoth Rebel Scout in the team and Kyle Katarn in order to generate lots and lots of turn meter. He is fantastic at elevating that team. They've been taking things like Layer out in 5v5s and are just generally an all-round reliable team. However, I wouldn't say it was the most exciting character. We're still kind of hoping that maybe we get his ship, the Fondor, come to the game, just so that you can double up on the value of investing in him. He does have triple Omicrons, but I've only got the one invested in him, which is Dreams with Ghosts. Overall, I'd say he is an okay character to invest in. Not the most flashy or the most interesting, but certainly not going to make your roster worse by investing in him, particularly if you already have pretty solid investments in your Rebel fighters as it stands. The other side of it is, of course, within TB, he does have a special mission which you can earn, I think it's Mark II rewards for your guild, and that's never a bad thing. Now, we started off this video with the Comeuppance. And we're not finishing on the Punishing One, but the only other ship that came out in the entirety of 2024 was the Punishing One. We didn't get a new meta capital ship come out to the game, which was sorely missed in my opinion. We had the Punishing One. And I have divisive opinions on the Punishing One. I am personally of the opinion that this ship should never have seen the light of day. Deploy the hates. Deploy the hates and tell me how wrong I am. But this ship, as a marquee ship, completely turned over the fleet meta. And a marquee ship should not do that, in my opinion. One marquee ship at 3 stars was able to take out Leviathan. It caused untold problems because CG tried to then overcorrect and created a horrible mirror match setting for the Leviathan that lasted a couple of months, and they've eventually fixed that by introducing a buff to the Scimitar. But, in my opinion, you should not release a marquee ship that elevates the Executor, which was already a top 3 ship, into a place where the Executor is now, in my opinion, unequivocally the best fleet in the game. And it still causes issues. This thing can still beat the Leviathan very reliably, and it can be very difficult to beat no matter what fleet you take against it. That being said, it is a phenomenally powerful ship, and everybody should get it, because it is just that broken. It is so powerful. It's got Deathmark, amazing survivability, nutty damage output, and makes Executor hit ultimate faster than you can blink. Get it. Basically, get it. Just do it, because it is that flipping powerful. I still maintain that, one, the Executor did not need any sort of lifting. It was fine where it stood. It wasn't designed to beat the Profundity. The Profundity was released to beat the Executor, and then they released the Punishing One later for the Executor to completely invalidate the Profundity. So now this capital ship under Executor is easier to get than both Profundity or Leviathan, and beats the crap out of both of them, and performs better on defense than both of them. It boggles my mind. I don't know why they did this, unless in February this year we're going to get the Fondor that goes into the Profundity fleet, and then the Profundity fleet completely wipes the floor with everything else, and then, you know, in 6 months' time we get some other bounty hunter ship that goes into the Leviathan, and then the Leviathan comes back. I don't want that to be the meta. We should have new capital ships, not marquee ships. This is the polar opposite of what they did with the Comeuppance. The Comeuppance kind of came in with a bit of a wet fart. This one came in with a nuclear bomb with hot sauce smeared all over it. You know what I mean? It was spicy, it was powerful, and it made you regret all of your life decisions that led you to this point. The punishing one is punishing. And I hate it. I hate this ship. Do better, CG. Silly ship. Silly. And finally, to wrap out the 2024 releases, we had the Spectre faction come to the game. Now, I've only shown the new marquees and, of course, GL Ahsoka Tano, but other units did get the Spectre faction tag, namely Ahsoka Tano, Fulcrum, and Chopper, but those are not new units, and they didn't really change fundamentally how they play regardless. Zeb technically half got the tag, it's dumb. Don't ask, I don't know why he's got so many callouts in General Syndulla's kit. But I'm going to go over this kind of one at a time and sort of talk about the pros and cons. We'll start off with Padawan Sabine Wren. Padawan Sabine Wren, really, really cool unit. Unfortunately, in isolation, doesn't particularly work. She can go into a Mandalorian team, of course. She can elevate things like Bo-Katan Mandalore, but it doesn't really help that team do anything that it doesn't already do. So unless you are getting a full Spectre faction, be it under General Syndulla, or if you want to throw her under GL Ahsoka Tano, she doesn't really fit anywhere else. That being said, when she does fit, she fits phenomenally well. Like her glove, you might say. The damage output on this girl is nutty. She feels like the Shin Hottie of the Spectre faction. She's just there to ramp up damage and then completely rearrange your face. She comes in with her rockets, blows things up, AoEs with off balance, lots and lots of damage, and just overall is a phenomenal unit. Not only that, she has an absolutely fantastically scary Territory Wars Omicron that will essentially double the offense on your GL Ahsoka Tano team, which is a scary prospect. You compare that with another Territory War Omicron that's on General Syndulla as well, to get double dipping in Territory Wars with Omicrons coming out the wazoo. Now, I would say that this second one over here, this second Omicron, is not nearly as impactful as the Sabine Wren one, but if you're going to go in, you might as well go balls deep. Am I right, General Syndulla? She does agree. Alright, so overall, Padawan Sabine Wren, lots and lots of damage output, a lot of fun, well-designed kit, lots and lots of really good work that they've done with the animations, and to be honest, the kit models look pretty cool as well. I think overall, they did a really solid job with these characters. Hu Yang, I was absolutely ecstatic to see come to the game. He is a fan favorite within the Star Wars universe, and they captured him very, very well. I love the fact that he's got his telescopic arms that come out, make him look like an Iron Spider out of Marvel, and he just goes up and punches the crap out of people. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that? He also enables your GL Ahsoka Tano to ultimate within 2 turns, which is really a lot of fun. Now, there are some issues, of course. For example, this special here is considered to be bugged by us, by the community. We think it's bugs. We are yet to see what CG has to say on the matter. They are still currently enjoying their holidays, and may they enjoy their rest. But essentially, this is supposed to do an instance of damage for every ally that is exiled at the start of battle. Under GL Ahsoka Tano, all of her Spectre allies are supposed to start the battle with exile, which means you would assume you do 5 instances of damage with this first hit. However, in practice, this hit is only doing 2 instances of damage, meaning it's only accounting for the first hit, and then Ezra Bridger exiles exile. Now, if you throw him in a droid team, he does do more instances of damage, which means there is something working here, but it is checking for the number of people that are exiled before GL Ahsoka Tano's leadership activates and exiles her whole team. That's a little bit disappointing, because it would make this ability do significantly more damage. That is the only real problem that I happen to have with this Spectre team. There are a number of bugs and inconsistencies that just shouldn't exist for a brand new premium team. For example, Ezra Bridger Exile. He was the conquest unit towards the end of the year, an absolutely brilliant plug-and-play Jedi, but also very, very strong in Spectres. Now, with Kanan's Legacy, he has an ability that is supposed to apply backup plan, okay? And it does apply backup plan. The problem is that backup plan just doesn't work. You are supposed to be able to revive if you get defeated with backup plan. However, I've tested this under numerous instances, and you can apply backup plan with Ezra Bridger Exile, and nothing happens. The unit dies, they don't revive. It's as simple as that. And that is unfortunately an unacceptable level of mistake that just really does impact how effective this GL team is. A number of ways to counter GL Ahsoka Tano depends on things like, let's use Galactic Legend Leia Organa. Drogon will then one-shot either Ezra or Padawan Sabine, and that's game over. But Ezra is supposed to start with backup plan available, or he will use, if he's got his Omicron available, and he uses Kanan's Legacy straight away, the whole team will have backup plan. So you can kill them, but then they'll revive. But it just doesn't work, and that's just not good enough in my book. So on paper, these characters should be phenomenal. They should be absolutely phenomenal. But unfortunately, there are bugs that are really hampering the success of this team. General Syndulla also has pulling rank. This is supposed to apply perfect defense if you use it on a character that's got both tenacity up and defense up, give you perfect defense, which is just a better form of defense up, essentially. But it is inconsistent in when it manages to apply. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it just hurts the team overall. So I'm hoping that some of the first things that we see from CG in 2025 is some much needed bug fixes to this brand new, highly expensive, very difficult to get Galactic Legend to make her feel just a little bit better. So we've discussed the marquee characters, but what about GL Ahsoka Tano? Overall, I'd say she is a pretty well-balanced Galactic Legend. She came to the field, she's not the one out there doing boatloads of damage or doing lots of flashy moves, she's got 0 AoEs, she's just a very tanky unit that passes out some really good buffs with lots of mastery ramping. She enables the rest of the team to do the work, while she just sits there and takes hits and counterattacks. It's okay, but that's about all I can say for it. She's just not as flashy as other GLs, she doesn't ramp damage like Lord Vader or JMK or Slacker or Rey, she doesn't have any sort of revive mechanic, she doesn't have any sort of, like high damaging abilities, either single target or AoE. Just feels a little bit, yeah. However, she does do what she's meant to do. You know, she protects the team, and then Ezra ramps up damage, and Huyang ramps up damage, and Padawan Sabine ramps up damage. There's a lot of control, there's a lot of good stuff that goes on. Overall, a pretty successful GL, and I think she would be in a really, really solid place if CG would just address some of the rather game-ending bugs that happen to exist within this team. And that is a really long video that's going to wrap up all of the characters that were released in 2024. Overall, I think it was actually a pretty good year. We had some really fun teams come to the game, some fan favorites, Gungans. Who thought Gungans would ever come to the game? We got, Phantom Menace content. We managed to get Baylan Skoll in the game. We got a new GL Ahsoka Tano in the game. We got a new Rey that people just don't like. But overall, it was a pretty good year, and it makes me very, very excited going into 2025 to see what we are going to get this year. Hopefully, a new raid that's fun, a new fleet meta that's fun. Hopefully, we're also going to get some fantastic content come to the game in terms of new marquees, and I'm really hoping that we get an overhaul to Territory Wars. Let me know your thoughts on about 2024 in the comments section down below. Give me a quick like and a subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the very next video. Peace out, and may the Force be with you.